Peace in our time. That's the seems to be the message of the day, both from Kiev and from Washington. We are all about finding peace and end of the war. I've been talking on this channel for really from the beginning of this war, ever since we've even had this channel, that we should be seeking peace and we should be trying to find a way to conflict resolution to end it, which instead of just always talking about more bombs and bullets and missiles and everything for Ukraine. And now it finally looks like we're moving in that direction. Not really. I'm sorry, I can't keep that on anymore. The words are being used, but when you look at the ground truth reality, which is where we live on this channel, we don't care about what words people are saying. We care about the actions that follow. And that's one of the big reasons why we have this channel. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity to give you the truth, because way too many times we see people making these statements and they go unchallenged in major media. We're not that way, and we're going to challenge them now. And so when you hear Biden talk about that he wants peace, when you hear Zelensky talk about that they want peace, you need to know what the truth actually is. And that's what we're going to do today. So first of all, let's look from just yesterday. We had Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, make an emphatic plea. Now, what you're about to see is he's going to talk about what he thinks this is supposed to accomplish. But here's the challenging part. I want you to consider this as you're listening to him speak here, because things have to have a plausible outcome. You have to have a chance to achieve what you're going to say. You can push the envelope. You can seek something that doesn't have a high chance of possibility, but maybe with things fall in the right place that things can work. That's fine. That's actually encouraged. I do that all the time. I live on the envelope. That's what you should do. Don't just, take the nice, easy path here, or because then you risk losing opportunities to do something really amazing. But what you don't get to do is to go into fantasy land and think that's going to happen. That's where we are. Here's the clip.
Putin not only wants to disrupt the peace summit and tries to do a lot for this purpose, but he is also afraid of what the summit can bring. The world is capable of forcing Russia into peace and into compliance with international security norms.
Yeah. Are they? Is the world capable of forcing Russia into peace? And so in context, what he's claiming here is this: he's talking about a peace summit that's coming up in June in Switzerland, that Switzerland put on the table, and they offered, and they invited 160 countries to be participating in this, except Russia. Of course, they weren't on the invite list. So just on the surface of it, you're going, hang on. You want to have a peace to end a war that's going to say, hey, let's find a way to end the conflict here between the two sides, except you're not even going to invite one of the two sides. And the one side you're not inviting is the one that's on the upper hand militarily. Now, so just on the surface of it, that makes no sense at all. But yet, when you look at even who's invited, you can see that people are already going, yeah, about this. This seems more like a PR stunt here, but a lot of people are going, sure, why not? I'll participate here. So you have 70 of the 160 that were invited have agreed to come. That does not include Russia or China. China was invited, but they're not coming. We'll talk about that more in just a second. So a lot of people are coming. A couple of big heavyweights. I think Germany and Japan, their prime minister and the head of state are both coming. But none of the players who were going to be able to do anything. And in this, just on the surface of what Zelensky just said there, this will force the world will be able to force Russia into a peace. And then you have to say, hey, hang on, why haven't they done it before? Is there something magic about going on the ground in Switzerland that there the world can force Russia to do something when they haven't for nearly 2.5 years so far? I mean, you see already where this has just fallen apart on the logic test and the rational test. It keeps on going, though. Here's the next part he said.
No one in the world is interested in this war, except the aggressor, and everyone is actually aware of this. The peace summit is a format that will not allow Putin to lie anymore. And without his lies, he is absolutely nothing.
Okay, who's to argue that Putin doesn't lie a lot, say lots of things that are untrue, and tries to manipulate global public opinion in his direction? He tells his own domestic population many things that aren't true. But there's also an aspect of what Putin has said that has been very much accurate and truthful from the beginning. And I'm talking about like 2007 from the beginning, back in the Munich Security Conference, when he first laid down the markers saying, hey, folks, I'm paraphrasing here, obviously, but he's like, dude, there ain't going to be no NATO in Ukraine, and we're going to be okay with it and passive with it. I mean, he started laying down the markers then. He continued to say it the next year when he showed with physical limited force in Georgia that you want to talk about going into there. He's going to use that to set that aside, to push back on that possibility. Didn't carry it any further. He didn't even go all the way into Georgia, just made sure that he took NATO off the table. And so he shows that he's continued on ever since then, that he's very, very deadly serious about where his red lines really are. So there are some things that you can trust what he says in terms of the claims when it comes to war and peace. That's something that's really important to understand. I actually had lunch here in D.C. a couple of weeks ago with a high-ranking diplomat, a very good friend of the United States for a long period of time, that told me, look, he said, we understand that a lot of what said publicly by Putin is not true, but we also recognize that the things he says that are, and it's consistent with what I had just told you here, what I've observed. So that's common knowledge among the Western countries, among our friends. They understand there are some things he says that you can count on, not the least of which was when Putin actually made good on his threats to invade Ukraine in 2022. He signaled that and was direct to that, both to the president of the United States and to the leaders of NATO. So let's first of all get that understood. There is some things that we can take to the bank on that when it comes to war and peace. Now, let's look at the United States part of this here, because you have President Biden has, said for a long time that he wants to end this war, that, we said we want Ukraine to win, we want Russia to lose, but that we're willing to talk negotiated settlement. And back in December, Biden went on television and just emphatically said it is crucial, it is vital that the United States have this position of leadership and that we do everything we can to make sure that our word is trusted, because the loss of that trust could be consequential, seriously consequential for the United States. Here's what he said back then.
The entire world is watching. What will the United States do? And think, if we don't support Ukraine, what's the rest of the world going to do? What's Japan going to do, which is supporting Ukraine now? What's going to happen in terms of the G7? What's going to happen in terms of our NATO allies? What are they going to do? If we walk away now, it'll only embolden other would-be aggressors. Stand for freedom. Literally stand for freedom. Let's get this done.
Let's get this done. Let's stand for freedom. So now then you have Zelensky putting everything on the line for this peace summit in Switzerland. And it's going to come right after the G7, actually in June. So of course, obviously, President Biden's going to put his name on the line. He's going to be sitting there shoulder to shoulder, because that's what we do with Ukraine. Or are we? Here's what Jake Sullivan was asked about that just a couple of days ago.
Will the president go to the peace summit next month in Switzerland? He would be the only G7 leader who has not accepted that invitation.
I don't have any announcements on that today. What I will say is that I've personally engaged in preparations for that summit, as have others in our government. And, we've been a key player in helping drive forward a vision of peace that includes Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity and the principles of the UN Charter. But I can't make any announcements today about the president's travel.
Okay, well, apparently now they're getting close to doing that. That was 3 days ago, because now then President Biden is set to skip the peace summit for a fundraiser. So you want to talk about that big speech he gave back in December about how, our credibility is on the line and we have to stand for freedom. But now then when you're talking about, yeah, but I am running for re-election here, and these are some pretty cool people. There's some A-listers here. Gary, if you can throw that other headline up there. This is according to the Newsweek here. I believe this is just last night or early this morning even. It says, according to people close to the matter who spoke with Bloomberg, Biden plans to miss the peace discussions hosted by Switzerland to attend a campaign event in L.A. on June 15th. The event will feature former President Barack Obama, late-night talk show Jimmy Kimmel, and Hollywood stars George Clooney and Julia Roberts. Hey, that's cool. I like Ocean's 11, one of my favorite films. I've enjoyed many of the shows that they had. That'd be cool to get to go to an event, but this is not something that's supposed to be cool. You've put the credibility of the United States on the line. The White House itself You've been just telling everybody how critical it is, how vital it is that America's credibility be on the line and that we stand for freedom. All those things I just showed you there. That's just one of them. He said that, routinely over the years since he's been in office during this war. And now then you see, but when it comes to his personal gain, then he's ready to just jettison. Now, it wouldn't surprise me if because of the backlash that comes from this, that he'll eventually end up going. But it's only going to be because he was shamed into doing so. It's not going to be because he actually believes this. And that's what you need to understand here. This is not merely him saying, I'm going to put my personal needs above the needs of another country. Because if he actually thought that their peace was possible, that this summit in Switzerland had any possibility of actually ending the war on terms favorable to the Ukraine side, I'm sure he would go. He wouldn't hesitate, I don't think, just because out of selfish interest, that would make him look really good. It would make him look like somebody who's actually going to succeed and accomplish something. But this shows you with actions that he recognizes this is absurd, as you can recognize here. Folks, I don't have to walk you through this. When you just from listening to what people are saying and what Zelensky's trying to claim and just knowing common sense, it's absurd to suggest that this has any possibility of success at all. And Biden knows that. So he's not going to waste his time and put his credibility further on the line by going to this so-called peace summit in Switzerland in June, which he knows is not going to have any impact. And it would cost him, a cool LA fundraising event where all these high rollers are going to be there and probably going to make millions of dollars for him. So he's going to say, okay, I'm not going to do that, but I am going to do this. And I don't know, honestly, what he thought was going to happen. When this summit came out and there was also this peace, this fundraiser on the same day, I mean, you got to wonder, where was your mind at? Tell them to make it on a different day, something. Do the same things both, but why set it on the same date when there's almost no way this can end well other than what it has? If you look at what Putin is also saying, here's an interesting thing. So he's been kind of puzzled by a lot of this, this claim that the Ukraine side wants to talk peace, but that he's not invited. So he's been talking to other people because, ironically, the guy who's on the top militarily, the guy who has the fundamentals on his side militarily, is still willing to talk peace. Now, if you've watched our channel for any time, you know that there was multiple opportunities in June 2021 to reach a settlement, to reach an agreement, so there didn't need to be any war. There was another one in December of 2021 that could have prevented and forestalled the war at all. After the war started, just a couple of months in, March, April 2022, there was a chance to end the war. Later in 2023, even earlier this year, another opportunity. We keep throwing them all out. You had on Tucker Carlson interviewed Putin in February of this year. Again, reiterated in public for the whole world to see, I'm still willing to engage in peace negotiations. Then you had, I think it was like 3 or 4 weeks ago, and we've shown it previously here, you had the Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, go again before the whole world and say, we would talk peace with Russia if only they were willing to, but they're not. They don't want to have any peace. They just want to keep fighting. And you're like, dude, do you never watch YouTube? Maybe they need to watch our channel. Maybe they are the ones that need to be watching Daniel Davis Deep Dive so that they understand what's going on in the world around them. That would certainly help. But it just makes us look more like the laughing stock of the world when the rest of the world can see these things for what they are. And then they see us making these obviously untrue statements. And so now then here again, on the eve of this Switzerland summit, you have Vladimir Putin, who's again, I think this is, I don't remember if this was just yesterday or maybe even earlier today in Belarus, where he met with Lukashenko there and again talked about the issue of peace.
Мы видим сейчас, что опять возобновились разговоры о том, что надо бы вернуться к переговорам. Но пусть возвращаются. Но возвращаются не исходя из того, что одна сторона хочет, а исходя из тех договоренностей принципиального характера, которые были достигнуты в ходе непростых переговоров в Беларуси и в Турции, и исходя из сегодняшних реалий, которые сложились на земле.
So he's saying the same thing here. based on the ground, based on the realities of the ground. So Russia's not the only one that's interested in talking peace. There's lots of others too. China and Brazil are actually talking about, hey, we want to have some peace too. The genuine desire, according to what China says, that they desire to end the peace. And they're talking some bilateral things with Russia. They're also with Brazil, I think they also have a separate desire that they're willing to talk peace on that front as well. China genuinely does want this over. They have there's no question that they have supported some things for Russia in some of their especially high tech issues. Ironically, they've also helped the Ukraine side in some of their electronics for some of the drones, especially. So they're kind of playing both sides here. But China actually does want the war in. That's not in their interest to have this going on, and they actually do want to try to set up. Set themselves up, I think, as peacemakers. They certainly have self-interest in this. They don't just saying that they're great humanitarians. They definitely want to benefit from this. And I think that if they can set themselves up as someone who's seeking peace and is having genuine possibilities, because they're not going and saying, we want peace on Russia's terms. They're actually saying, nobody's going to get everything they want here, but we need to find the least common denominator. It makes sense. It's actually logical and rational to do and would be possible. It's certainly not going to be any kind of a given or easy situation, but at least it's rational. It's something that has some possibilities of success if people are willing to engage in conversations. But you see, the United States is not willing to deal with reality. We're continuing to want to go down the path that says we still want the optimum outcome. We want Ukraine to win. We want Russia to lose. So you see Zelensky's making these absurd claims that have no basis in reality. The world is not going to force Russia to do anything because they can't. If that was possible, it would have already happened long time ago. But they don't have that capacity because it's a war, folks. It's a war. Russia has devoted their entire industrial capacity. They put their nation on the line. They're expending their own sons and daughters into this fight there because they view it as an existential crisis. And they are either going to get what they want at a negotiating table or they're going to continue to fighting. And that's one of the things you need to understand. Russia has the capacity to continue on. They just hired a new minister of defense who is an economist by trade because he's working with industry to set things up long term. They're not just looking to try to get this wrapped up in the next couple of months. They're saying, hey, if this keeps going on for years with an S, that's what they're going to do. So they are continuing to retool their economy. And by all accounts, they can do this for many years to come, each month getting stronger and stronger. So if they need to, they can go this way. Now, if Russia actually had the desire to conquer all of Ukraine, to go into NATO, which so many hysterically in the West claim is, oh my God, we have to fight them because that's why they have to lose. Otherwise, they're coming for us. If that was what they wanted, Putin wouldn't be talking about peace. He would be saying, we're going to put more tanks and more bombs and more airplanes and everything else in the air. And we're going to continue going until we defeat Ukraine because they're on the upside right now. That's what they would do if that was their capacity. But it's not their capacity. It's never been their capacity, both in the words that they have claimed and in their deeds. It all lines up. Now, I said at the beginning, Putin has no problem lying about things left and right, but everything has to be seen in the context of ground truth reality. And when his words and actions line up and they're valid on the ground, then you need to take that to the bank. You need to trust that because that's where it's at. And look, again, even if Putin had this secret desire to conquer all of Ukraine or to go into NATO countries and to conquer the Baltics, for example, here, he doesn't have the capacity to do it. And even these latest events on the battlefield really illustrate just how limited Russia actually is. They can continue to go forward methodically and probably even if the Ukraine army doesn't collapse, and as I've told you, I think that there's a shot that they could collapse before the end of the summer for various reasons, but they might not. They might be able to continue on, but Russia also will continue on and they'll stay on the top. And if they have to methodically, meter by meter, continue to move forward even another year, maybe a year and a half, they can. And eventually they can just grind them into dust. That's the capacity, but that's it. They probably don't have much more capacity to even go up to the Dnieper River, to take the city of Kharkov or that region, to take Odessa down on the Black Sea coast. It would take everything they've got and a long, long time to do it. Just look at this operation that they've had in the northern part of Kharkiv right now. And since they took Avdiivka and moved a little bit to the west, they made some pretty decent gains for a while, but Ukraine has moved in reinforcements into both of those places. Now they're getting a little bit more ammunition from the west. And now all of a sudden, those quick gains have now turned back into the grinding things, the attrition that preceded the months before Bakhmut and Avdiivka fell. So you see that Russia can't just go on this big thing and just plow through the Ukraine side, or they would have done it already. They don't have the capacity, which means there is no chance at all, talking about reality on the ground, that Russia has any capacity to go into a 32-member military alliance. They don't have the capacity, folks. So that's not on the ticket. What then does make sense? Given those realities, what should we be doing? We should be actively seeking an actual negotiated settlement. It makes entire sense for the West, for our national security, for our economic security and prosperity. That makes so much sense. And we would gain so much by getting this stupid war over with. If we care anything about the Ukraine side, we would want to end the war and end this pointless bloodletting on their side there, and then begin the long, arduous process of rebuilding. Those are the things that should be done. But instead, what are we doing? We're continuing to take actions that possibly exacerbate the war and expand it. So given all those combat realities I just talked to you a minute about how the offensive has slowed down, but that the fundamentals still reside overwhelmingly on Russia's side, why then is the Secretary General of NATO, Jens Stoltenberg, saying stuff like this?
So to be clear, you're asking the US to lift the restrictions on the use of American weapons over Russian territory?
I believe the time has come for allies to consider whether they should lift some of the restrictions they have imposed on weapons donated to Ukraine. Because we need to remember what this is. This is a war of aggression by Russia against Ukraine. Ukraine has the right to defend themselves, and that includes also striking targets on Russian territory.
Well, what possible tactical advantage does that give? If you were actually seeking a negotiated settlement to where you were saying, all right, let's increase the pain a little bit on the Russian side so that they're willing to come to the table, then we can seek negotiated settlement. You could say that might be a tactic, but Russia's already saying that. They're already willing to come to the negotiating table. So what could this do? By escalating the war further and to firing American weapons, as he's specifically arguing there, or other Western weapons like the UK and German, into Russia to strike targets, which they say they will respond in kind. Russia has said this past week that if the UK sends some of their weapon systems that attack directly into Russia proper, that they would return the favor into the UK. Now, whether they mean that or whether I don't, it's unknown here. But why would we want to play around with that? Because that is the one thing that could genuinely expand the war beyond the Ukraine side and risk war for the whole NATO organization. And of course, we know if you watched our show yesterday with Ted Postal, that could go nuclear and it would be catastrophic for our end. There is zero upside. No upside whatsoever in going down this path. But you see, it's part of a larger issue. Now, you just saw Stoltenberg there saying he wants permission from the United States to use our weapons to strike deeper. But it's already happening, folks, on the Ukraine side with their own weapons. Here was just a couple of days ago, there was a really concerning strike on a Russian advanced missile or radar system. And this is a strike on their strategic early warning radar site. And it is a big deal, as this article in the War Zone here talks about. And in case you're not aware of what happened, there was a Ukrainian drone that penetrated Russian air fences and hit this radar site, which is the only purpose of this thing is to give advance warning to Russia of strategic nuclear weapons striking into it coming in from the West. This has nothing to do with the war that's going on the ground in Ukraine, nothing on the tactical front. This is a strategic issue here, and the only benefit that would give is to potentially blind Russia to an oncoming nuclear strike. So it's a big deal to them. And their I believe his deputy prime minister issued some pretty dark statements about what could happen if this continues to go down the path here, because they said they're not going to allow themselves to be blinded against a potential nuclear strike. And we already know that Russia, I don't remember if it's over, if it's still going on today, but it has been a non-strategic nuclear exercise, a tactical nuclear weapon exercise. It is in their doctrine to use. So why do you want to continue to go down this path? Why do you want to take the possibility of escalating this war when there's no possible upside? That doesn't help you at all. So why do we want to do this? And we're going to have on Monday Alexander Mercurius on our show. We actually had a chance to meet him when we were in UK a couple of days ago. He's going to be on Monday at 1 o'clock. You're not going to want to miss that there. But he was on his own show that ran earlier today, was talking about some of the problems that he sees and some of the alarm that he has on the fact that we're going into unprecedented territory. It's a long time we've been doing proxy wars where the U.S. or the Soviet Union or Russia took action against the other in third parties, the classic proxy war. But this is one of the first times that he says where it's now possibly taking place on the territory of a nuclear weapon state. Here's how he put it.
This is going to be the first ever time that I know of where over the course of that proxy war, one side is assisting the other, is assisting its proxy to conduct attacks on the national territory of the other superpower. That breaks a convention that has existed ever since the end of the Second World War and which has been considered sacrosanct. It tells you, how far some people in the Biden administration are prepared to go. And of course, it opens up terrifying possibilities.
Indeed, it does. And again, if you please go back and watch our show from just yesterday with Ted Postal to see exactly what those terrifying possibilities are. That also took another poll here, another turn in a bad direction when the Polish foreign minister was quoted as saying that what he's claiming is that the United States told Russia, Gary, if you can throw that one up there, he's claiming that the Americans have told the Russians that if you explode a nuke, even if it doesn't kill anybody, we will hit all your target positions in Ukraine with conventional weapons. We will destroy all of them. So one of the possibilities that some have suggested that could be a first use of a nuclear weapon is that Russia may say, we're going to launch this tactical nuclear weapon in an unpopulated area as a show of our resolve and demonstrations. And at least according to the Polish foreign minister, a NATO ally, he's claiming that the U.S. has told Russia that even if you do that, basically it's war right then. Then we're going to go in a conventional fight, and then we're going to enter the war here. But look, not only is that stupid to do, again, why do you want to even risk a war with a nuclear state that has no upside for your country? There is zero, folks. Zero. There's no way that you can say in the best case scenario, there is no best case scenario. There is only the possibility of it exploiting, of it, you getting into a conventional war, that it doesn't go somehow into nuclear, and we lose a lot of American people and soldiers are killed for nothing. Our country ends up with nothing. And that's the best case scenario, because the most likely case scenario is nuclear exchange. I can't even believe I have to say this out loud, but the leaders of our country right now are even playing and toying with the possibility of escalating a war against Russia, which has no value for our country. And yet, that's what we're doing. Now, we had John Mearsheimer, who we're also going to have on Wednesday, back next week, and you definitely don't want to miss him on next week. He's always got some great things to say. And here's one of the things he has said in the past about what we ought to do given the ground truth realities. John, we have boxed ourselves into a corner. Now I don't know how to get out of this. What should we do? How can we take this mess right now and get it fixed?
Well, there's only one possible solution. And I want to underline the word possible because it's not clear it would work, but it's the only game in town, in my opinion. And that is, we do everything we can to shut down the war immediately. And we go to great lengths to create a neutral Ukraine. We get the Ukrainians to make it clear to the Russians that they have no intention of joining NATO. They will be a neutral state, and they will go to great lengths not to pursue a security policy that threatens Russia in any way. And then the second thing that needs to be done is that the security relationship between the United States and Ukraine has to be completely ended.
That's a sober, logical, rational policy for the United States. That is exactly what we should have. I wish to God that he was the senior member of the Biden administration giving advice to the president, because that's something that can be achieved. It's something that has a positive outcome, or at the very least, it's something that will limit further damage. That's where we should go. And yet you see that the Biden administration continues to talk escalatory means. We continue to say things that don't make any sense, that aren't realistic. We want to seek peace, but we actually have no interest in peace. We're not even going to the summit because we know it's just a bunch of words that means nothing. We allow Zelensky to make statements like these absurd claims that he made yesterday about that the world is going to force Russia into doing something, and we're going to force them to stop lying, which is absurd. It's embarrassing how untrue it is. And it's so transparently so that people can see it on the ground. And yet we just can't seem to break loose from this. And I find it both distressing and somewhat puzzling how the United States of America and all this credibility and reputation we built over centuries, and especially everything since the Second World War and, after the Cold War, how we were brilliantly positioned to be able to ensure peaceful relations around the world for then decades to come, indefinitely into the future. And we've squandered it. What we should have done, gone back way far, is to actually say we recognize that we've lost the threat that used to be from the USSR, that we had all these, the NATO forces arrayed against. And instead of giving Russia reason to rearm and to get their military back bigger, because we continued methodically year after year, moving closer and closer to their borders, which any nation, certainly we, would not sit passively by. There's so many things we could have done. We could have advanced diplomacy. We could have tried to intertwine economies so that we have win-win outcomes, so that there would be no reason for anybody to go to war against the other side. Just have normal economic and diplomatic and state-on-state relations, like has been the case many times in European history. They got a lot of problems with wars in history too, but there are lots of periods of times where they do things that make sense, and the continent can have peace, sometimes for decades at a time. But now then we're going down a path that will squander all of those opportunities that we have. And folks, listen, I just want to leave you with this. This is not just, hey, my idea is better than this idea. The things that I and people like Mercurius and Mearsheimer, McGregor, several of these other people, Jacques Beau, we're all saying these things are reality. These things are possible that we're talking about. These solutions actually are valid. But the way that we're going, the way the country's going, and it's not just the United States, it's the UK, it's Germany, and certainly Ukraine, they're going down a path that is not even connected to reality. And if we don't do something to interdict that pretty quick, we're going to end up getting ourselves sucked into a war that all too easily could go nuclear. And that is something that we cannot tolerate, and we must do everything in our power to prevent. For the future of our country, for the future of the globe, we've got to catch this right now, nip it in the bud, and get back to reality. That's your deep dive for today. I do want to touch just a real quick second on John Mearsheimer, who's coming back on Wednesday, because there's lots of issues going on in the Indo-Pacific. And we've spent a lot of time talking about the issues going on in the Israeli-Hamas war, and certainly with the Russia-Ukraine war here for appropriate reasons. But there are also starting to be some troubling signs in the Indo-Pacific, especially in regards to the newly installed president of Taiwan and China's reaction to it, and American responses to some of that. And I want to make sure that you're aware of what's going on there. So tune back in on Wednesday, where John Mearsheimer is going to be back on, and he's going to give us an update on what's going on in the Indo-Pacific. Do not want to miss that. I wish it were not another potential hotspot that we have to worry about, but it is, and I want to make sure that you're aware. So tune in next week. It's going to be a lot of great shows next week. Alexander on Monday, I talked about there. We have John Mearsheimer on Wednesday. We also have Doug McGregor. We have Jacques Beau back again. It is an all-star lineup, folks. Don't want to miss any of these shows. We're going to continue to bring you this kind of hot stuff that's happening and some of the best voices, most rational, intelligent people out there. You can count on Daniel Davis Deep Dive for that. Be sure to like and subscribe. Share this with your friends. Make sure that they get to enjoy what's coming next week. And we'll see you on Monday on Daniel Davis Deep Dive.